Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting video on AWS Elastic Compute Cloud, or basically called as EC2. Now in this video we are going to learn how to create a virtual server on the cloud with the help of this service provided by AWS, that is EC2. Now what is basically AWS EC2? So EC2 stands for Elastic Compute Cloud. It's basically a web service which provides resizable compute capacity in the cloud. Basically, it means that once you deploy your app on the cloud, then you can change the compute capacity whenever you need. It allows you to run virtual servers on demand. And the most important part about AWS EC2 is it's scalable. Scalable meaning that as and when the number of users increase in your EC2 instance, it can also do scaling. That means it can increase the number of instances or it can even decrease the number of instances based on the resources it is using. Okay, so that we will not be covering that part about load balancers and auto scaling in this video. This is just a basic introduction of how you can use EC2 to deploy a website on the cloud. So let's begin. So before we begin with the actual usage of EC2, let's first understand why do we use EC2. So the main reasons are scalability, that I just explained what is scalability. Then it is cost efficient because you only pay for what you use, right? So for example, if you don't have so many users in your app right now, then you don't have to unnecessary waste resources by just keeping your machines running. So you can just reduce the number of machines and you only have to pay for the servers which are actually running. Okay, now flexible because once you start using EC2, you will realize that you are completely free to select whichever OS you like and whichever instance type you like and the amount of storage and other things. So everything is flexible. Based on what you choose, you will have to pay according to that. Now it is reliable because it has multiple data centers worldwide, and if you properly configure it, then it will be hosted in multiple zones so that your website never goes down. And the last and the most important is the deployment speed. So if you have ever used EC2 before, you know it hardly takes 30 seconds to launch a instance up and running. Okay, so let's understand some of the concepts that we should know before we dive it deep into EC2. So the first thing is instances. Now the word instances may be new to many of us. It simply means that you are starting a new server, right? So it's not a physical server, it's a virtual server. That's why we call it as an instance. Okay, then AMI stands for Amazon Machine Image. Now, as you know, if you have used VirtualBox or Hyper-V or these types of hypervisors, then you know that when you want to run a virtual machine, then you need an image to run it, right? So usually you will install an OS with the help of ISO. But here in AWS, you will hear a lot about something called as AMI. AMI is nothing but these are images of OSs, or maybe it is images with OSs along with your apps with all the configurations already done. Okay, so basically AMIs can be a base image like just an Ubuntu image. So you can start with the help of just an base image, or you can even create your own AMIs by using any of the base images and installing your application and create an AMI out of that. So AMIs are nothing but images which has an OS along with all the configurations required to run your app already pre-installed. Okay, now next is instance type. Now instance type is nothing but when you select a machine, so every machine will have some type of some amount of CPU, RAM, all those things, right? So these things it is not directly configurable. That means you cannot select any random number that you want. So let's say if I ask you, can I select a CPU of 1.35? So that is not possible. So what AWS has done is they have created a lot of instance types. We also call it as flavors. So the different instance types are being created, like say for example T2 micro, T2 nano, so like that. So you just have to select any one of the instance type which is the closest to what you actually need. So let's say you need something like a 10 virtual CPUs and around 16 GB RAM, then you just select the closest one to whatever is your desired CPU capacity. Okay, so that is what instance types are. So we will see this in detail when we look at the demo. The next part is EBS, Elastic Block Store. So this is where your all your storage will be done. That is, so if you take an example of a computer, you will have will have a CPU, you will have some RAM, and also you will be installing your OS and everything in a particular disk, right? It can be an SSD, it can be HDD. So that type of storage on the cloud is called as elastic block storage. Now next two are very important to understand EC2. So the next one is security groups. Security groups forms the major part of understanding EC2. So security groups are nothing but a sort of virtual firewalls for your instances. Okay, so now obviously if you are installing an OS, then the OS will definitely have its own firewall. But this is slightly different. So this is the firewall of AWS. So it be before even before the request reaches the virtual instance, this firewall kicks in and it either stops or allows a particular request. So many of the times it is possible that your app is not working because it is blocked from the security group. So understanding how to configure security group plays a very crucial role in understanding EC2. The next part is key pairs. Key pairs is basically used for authentication. So now usually if you have created any Linux in virtual machine or something, you usually log in with the help of username and password. Now transferring password through the internet is a bit risky. So it's a better way is to use asymmetric encryption. That means there will be a different key for encryption at the transmission side and a different key at the receiver side. So that is called as key pairs. So whenever we want to log in with into EC2 on any Linux server, then we will usually create a key pair, which is nothing but a couple of keys. One is private and one is public. The private key is usually the public key is shared with everyone, and the private key is stored with you. So we will use key pairs to authenticate, and I will show you how to use that key pairs using a software called Putty to connect to your instance. Now, where can I use EC2? So EC2 can be used for all the different types of application. Like if you want to host websites or your apps, your softwares, your backend services, or you want to do some big data processing, machine learning, you just want to test your app, you can do that. And in fact, very popular is running game servers of popular multiplayer games like CS:GO, Counter Strike, then other gaming. So you can see, look at the different companies who are using EC2. Netflix uses EC2, Airbnb, Adobe, Pinterest. So all these people use AWS to deploy their services. So, very important, as I told you before, key pairs. So, key pairs, as you know, are a set of security credentials, a public key and a private key, used to log in securely to EC2 instances. Now, I have kept a separate slide for this. The reason is understanding key pairs is a bit tricky because you may not be used to using key pairs to log in. So we will just look at an explanation of how the things work. So for example, let's say Alice and Bob wants to communicate or send some data over the internet. So what Bob does, Bob generates a couple of keys. One is the public key and one is the private key. The private key is kept with Bob itself. So if Bob is generating, then the private key is not shared with anyone. So it is saved, it is there only with Bob. But the public key is shared with everyone to whom he wants to communicate with, right? So Alice has Bob's public key. So whenever Alice wants to send something, he or she sends it by encrypting it with the Bob's public key. Now, the best part about public key is once you encrypt, it can only be decrypted by a private key. So even if anybody has the public key, it's of no use because a message which is encrypted using a public key can only be decrypted by a private key. So once it is encrypted, this encrypted message is sent to Bob. Because Bob already has his private key, he will decrypt it and get the message. So anyone in between will not be able to get the data that is being shared between them, right? So that is the advantage of key pairs. So once you understand this, let's understand another very important concept, that is security groups. So security group is like a virtual firewall. So like for example, so this, let's suppose this is your EC2 instance. Now this instance has an inbound security group and an outbound security group. So let's say this is the security group 1. So it has an inbound rule and an outbound rule. And let's suppose this is your PC, right? So this PC is trying to connect to the instance. So when it tries to send a message, the security group comes first and checks whether you are allowed to do that action or not. So let's suppose this PC is allowed and this PC is not allowed, right? So when you try to communicate, the security group checks that okay, your credentials match, so you will be allowed. The other person's credential does not match, so his request will be blocked. Okay. Similarly, the instance itself can communicate to the outside world. Okay. So when it does that, this security group kicks in, that is outbound one, and it checks whether you are allowed to go out or not. Okay. So let's suppose in the outbound, I want to block all traffic. So I will remove all rules, and then when the instance tries to go outside the network, it will not be allowed to go out because the security group blocks it. So that is the important thing to understand about inbound and outbound security rules. So inbound is nothing but whatever traffic that is allowed into the instance, so that anything coming from outside the network to the instance, right? Outbound is something which goes from the instance to the outside world. Okay, so both these rules together form the security group. Okay, now once we understand all the basics, let's now go ahead and look at a simple demo. So now I'm logged into AWS console. So now how to reach to this service? Okay, so you can see there is this icon. We can click on this, go to compute, and then go to EC2. So this is one way of going to the service. Another way is just type EC2 on the search bar and it will open up EC2, right? So let's click on this, and this is how the EC2 dashboard looks like. Okay, now obviously if you want to directly go ahead and launch an instance, you can click on the launch instance button and you can go ahead. But before launching an instance, I would like to do a few things. Okay, the first and foremost, I will like to go to the networking tab, network and security, and go to key pairs and create a new key pair for my instance. Okay, so now why is this important is because when you create a key pair, a public key is downloaded to your PC, and that is what will be required for us to log in to our instance. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's create a key pair. Let's call it my portfolio key. Okay, so I'm going to call this as my portfolio key. The key pair type will be RSA and the file format will be PPK. Now the reason I'm selecting PPK is because I'm going to use putty to log into the instance, but if you're going to use Linux, then you can use the PEM format. Okay, now let's select PPK and click on create key pair. Now before clicking create key pair, I would suggest that whenever you create any resource on AWS, you should definitely add a tag. Okay, now the reason why we add tag is pretty much optional, but it is important because when you add tags, you are basically grouping all your resources together. Okay, now what happens when you group? So majority of the time what happens is, if you randomly go on creating resources, at the end when you want to release those resources or delete those resources, you sometimes forget what are the resources that you have created. So for example, you are using 3 to 4 resources from all the different services of AWS, and sometimes you forget to delete one of the resources. Now what happens is, when you try to log in after 3 4 months, that may be a paid service and you get charged unnecessarily for not using the service at all, right? Because it was running all these months. So that is why it is a good idea to give a tag, the same tag to all the resources that you're creating, so that at the end we can identify what are the resources we have created and delete it accordingly. Okay, so I'm going to add a resource. Let's call it name. You can call it anything, whatever you want. So let's call it, okay, so I'm just using this tag name portfolio. Okay, that's it, and I'm going to create a key pair. So now I have created key pair, and as soon as I click create, you can see I'm getting a I have downloaded something. So let's save it, and I have downloaded a ppk file, my portfolio key.ppk. Now this file is very important. Once our instance boots up, then to log into the system we will need this. Okay, so this is the first step. So first step is done. We have created a key pair and downloaded the key pair as well. The second step is very important, is the security group. Okay, so go to network and go to security group. Now security group, as I told you, is the virtual firewall which controls the inbound and outbound traffic to our instance. Okay, now what we are creating right now is, let's first create it and then I will explain it what we are going to do. So let's click on create security group, and here you can give any name to your security group. Let's call it my SG, my portfolio SG. Okay, and you can select your VPC on which you want to run this security group. Okay, so whatever VPC you select, your instance should also be on that VPC. Okay, so I'm going to select the default VPC. Okay, then let's come down. Now this is the very important part. Okay, so there are inbound rules and outbound rules. Now in the outbound rules there is already one entry, that is all traffic from, that is to the destination. Okay, and from on this destination, this is the IP address that is already present, and this IP address means everything. Okay, so that means all traffic is allowed to go out to anywhere. Okay, now this is a common rule that is already added because the instance can go outside. So the any request from the instance can go outside. That is what this means. So if I just explain it, so if you remove this rule from here, then your server will not be able to communicate to the internet. Okay, so many a times what happens is, when you configure, you see some entry over here, and let's suppose you just delete it, so there will be no problem as such. But if you delete this, but if you delete this particular entry, and if you try to install any new packages on your instance, then that will not work, because to install a package it needs to go out to the internet and get that, download that package, right? So if this entry is not there, that will not happen. Okay, so that's why this is very, very important. Okay, but what is as a security concern, what is important is this part, inbound rules. Okay, so this is what controls our security part. So here you can see, as such, there are no inbound rules because this we have to add. Okay, so let's add an inbound rule. Click on add rule and click on this, and since our machine is going to be a Linux system, if you want to connect to a Linux system, then you need to have SSH enabled. Okay, so let's select SSH, and you can see automatically port 22 is selected, and then you have to select which IP is allowed. Okay, now usually it should be my IP. That means whatever the IP you are trying to select. But then if suppose that IP changes, that means your computers or your internet's IP changes, then this will lock you out, right? Then you have to again come to your security group and update it, right? But then for the time being, what I'm going to do is anywhere. Okay, so any IP is allowed to remotely connect to the instance. Okay, but then nobody will be able to connect because we are using a key pair. So only the person who has the key pair will be able to log in. So this is fine. So this entry will be okay. It is not going to create much issue. Then the next entry that I'm going to do is this: we are going to host a express app on the site, on this particular web server. So on this server we are going to host a site which is an express app, and this express app is going to run on port 3000. Okay, now based on whichever port your app is running on, you have to create the next entry. Okay, so let's suppose your app is running on port 3000. So you will say custom TCP and port 3000. And the source is usually from anywhere, right? Because you want to allow any machine on the internet to view your website, right? So you should select anywhere. Now, right now, this means any machine with IPv4 address, right? So it is a good idea to also add all the rules that you're adding with IPv6 also, so that if any PC is having an IPv6 address, then also this will work. Okay, so I have added these rule. Now this is for specifically for the app that I am going to host. Now if let's suppose your app is running on port 80, that is an HTTP port, right? So you have to add that as a rule, right? So now because HTTP is a well-known port, it must be here already. So you can just select that and you can see port 80 is already selected. Then from anywhere you can select IPv4, and similarly you can add a IPv6 entry also. Now let's take one more example. Let's suppose you want to set up a mail server, okay, SMTP server, right? So you can click on add rule. Okay, look for whether there is SMTP is available. So you can see SMTP is available. Let's select that, and then you can see automatically port 25 is selected, and from source I will select anywhere IPv4, right? Now if suppose SMTP was not available, so what you can do is you can just set it as custom TCP and then select port 25 over here, right? So that is one way of doing it. Now these entries I don't need, I just added it so that I can explain you how the firewall is set up. So let's delete these. The only entries I need is SSH, because without this I cannot log in. Then this is the port at which our app is running. So this one for IPv4, this one for IPv6, and that's it. Okay, so once this is done, you can go ahead and click on create security group. But before that, again, whenever you see tags, it is a good idea to add the tags, and I would like to add the same tag that I have used in the key pair. When we created a key pair, we used a tag that was portfolio, right? So the same tag I'm going to put everywhere wherever I'm going to create any resource. Okay, you will see at the end why this is important and how we can use this to our advantage. Okay, so let's click create security group, and that's it. Now so we have done two steps. The first step was to create a key pair. The second step was to create a security group. So both these things are done. Now let's move on to our main task, that is to create an instance. So let's go to instances, and you can see right now there is one instance running. This is how it looks, but we will be creating a brand new instance. Okay, so let's click on launch instance, and this is the page where we configure our instance. Okay, so it's a long form, but it hardly takes 20 seconds to fill it if you're actually doing it, but I will need a little bit more time because I have to explain each and every step. Okay, so the first step is to give name. Okay, so let's call this as my portfolio. Okay, so let's call this as my portfolio. Then let's go down. The second step is to select the OS. Okay, so I prefer Ubuntu. Whichever OS you like, you can select that. Okay, so this Ubuntu has quite a few different versions. So here you can see there is 24.04, 22, and others also are there, but I'm going to select the latest one, that is 24.04 LTS. Okay. You can see other OSs are also there, like Windows, Mac OS, Amazon Linux, SUSE. So all these are there. Whichever you are comfortable with, you can select that. Okay. Then let's go down. This is very important, the instance type. Okay. So as I told you, you can select how much CPU and how much RAM you want, and based on that the costing will be decided. Okay, so you can see, for example, T2 micro. So this is a flavor called T2 micro, which belongs to a family called T2, which has one virtual CPU and 1 GB of memory. Okay, and the cost of running a Linux OS, like for example here, is 0.0116 USD per hour. So for every hour that you run this machine, you will be charged this much US dollar. Okay, now let's look at the different instance types that are there. So T2 micro, you can see this is free tier eligible. Then there is T2 nano. The only difference is it has only 0.5 GB of RAM. Then you can see T3 medium. So T3 medium has two CPUs and 4 GB of RAM. And you can see the different uh, uh, flavors that are available. So there are too many. Okay, so you can see these are out of our reach because they are too costly. And if you go down, you will see even some instances where there is, like for example, this M7GD metal, which has 64 virtual CPUs and 256 GB memory, right? So like this, there are many other machine types, but all these are out of our reach, so we will be selecting T2 micro. So T2 micro is fine for our app. Based on your app, you can select, let's say, T2 medium or anything as per your choice. So in for our case, I will be selecting T2 micro. Okay, so once T2 micro is selected, now here is the next step, that is key pair. Now if you remember, we our first step was to create a key pair, right? Now if you would have forgotten to create a key pair, you can still create a key pair from here, but since we have already created it, we will select it from here. Okay, so you can see our key pair is here, so let's select that. Okay, so my portfolio key. Now once this is selected, let's go down. Now if you forget to select this, or if you select some different key pair, then once the instance is created, you will not be able to log into the system. So this is very important step. Let's go down. Network settings. So network settings also very important, because this selects the security group, and you can see from here there is an option to create a security group, or you can also select an existing security group. Now since we have already done this step, that is to create a security group, so we will not create a security group, instead we will be selecting an existing security group. Now from the drop down, you can see our security group, that is my portfolio SG, right? So that is done. Now let's go down, and the final step is to configure the storage. So what storage do you need to store your files? Okay, so by default it is 8 GB, and that is enough for our example. Okay, so this is done, all the steps are done, and on the right you can see there is one option, that is to select the number of instances. So if you select one, okay, so based on these rules, one instance will be created. But if you select 2, 3 or more than that, then those many instances will be created. Okay, but for our case, one instance is fine. Okay, so let's click launch, and let's wait for it to launch. So you can see it is the instance creation is has started successfully. Now let's go back to instances. Now right now it's not visible. Let's click on refresh and you can see our instance is initializing, right? So let's just wait for some time to get our instance running. Okay, so by the time this is getting initialized, I forgot to do one more step. That step is, now once this instance starts, we need to connect to the system, right? Now there are many ways of connecting to this instance, but I prefer that you use the putty method. Okay, so I will show you how to download that. So you can go to your Google and just type putty download and you can get the first website. Go to download putty and you can download which the installer based on what type of installer you are using. Okay, so this is usually only required if you are on Windows. Linux, you can directly use your terminal to connect to the instance. Okay, so Linux to Linux connection is very easy, but if you want to connect from Windows to Linux, then you will need putty. Okay, so installation is very simple. You just download it, click next, and the installation. Okay, now once the instance is running, you can click on the instance and it will open some stats related to that particular instance. Now, what I'm more interested in, so you can see there is lots of information that is getting displayed. So like for example, the instance ID, the private IP address, the public IP address, and then the VPC ID on which it is running, then the subnet ID, and like that there are many things that are getting displayed. Okay, the AMI that we have used, okay, Ubuntu, right? So all these things are getting displayed. Okay, now if we go to networking, we can also see the interfaces, the net IP addresses and everything that is getting assigned to this, right? And then if we go to security, you can also see the security group that is being used for this instance. Okay, so this is very important. We have already configured this, so we don't have to worry about anything. But if at all you forgot to configure this, then you know which security group you are using, right? Okay, so once this is done, let's go to details. Okay, now few things that you should know is this IP address is the IP address of your instance. Okay, now a common confusion is, since there are two IP addresses, one is private, one is public, you may think of using any one of them to connect to the instance, but that is not true. Only public IP is can be used to connect from the outside world. Private IP is for internal uses only, so we cannot use this. But we can use this to connect. Okay, but the problem with this IP is that if suppose we restart our server, or let's say we shut down our server for some time and then start it again after some time, then there is no guarantee that your instance will get the same IP address. Okay, so that is a bit of a risk to take, right? So it's a good idea to convert this IP address, or at least assign this instance a permanent IP, or what we call it as a static IP. Okay, a static IP in AWS is called as an elastic IP. Okay, so let's go down to network and security, go to elastic IPs. Okay, so right now if you see, there are no elastic IPs. Okay, that means we don't have any IP address which is static. Okay, so let's first get an IP address. So let's click on allocate elastic IP and then go down, and again this is very important. Let's add a tag, let's call it name and portfolio. Okay, so that later on we can delete it. Okay, so let's click on allocate, and you can see we got a new IP address 44.197.22.57. This is a public IP. Okay, but currently this is not being used. Okay, if you see, let's go to associated instance ID. It is not associated with anything, right? So we have taken this IP, we have requested EC2 to give an IP, but we are not using it anywhere. Okay, now the way this gets charged is the costing of this IP address is it depends on whether you are just allocating the IP address and not using it, or if you're allocating it and also using it. Okay, so the first case, if you allocate the IP address and if you do not use it, then you will be charged. Okay, so there will be some charge that will be um, uh, connected to your account. But if you attach this IP address to any instance, then you will be not charged anything. Okay, so once you get an IP address, your first task should be to allocate it to a instance. Okay, so let's go to actions. So select this IP, go to actions, and you just say associate elastic IP address. Okay, so once you do that, it will ask you to what do you want to associate it with, right? So I want to associate it with an instance. So from here you have to select the instance. So you can see the two instances that we are having. So I will select my instance, that is my portfolio. Okay, and then you can select an private IP address and then allow this elastic IP address to be reassociated. That's it, and click on associate, and that's it. So now if I come this side, you can see I am my IP static IP address is associated with this instance. Okay, so let's go to instances now, and if you see, it may take a little time for it to update. So you can see currently elastic IP is empty, so it may take a little time to get updated. Okay, so till that time, let's just refresh a few times. Okay, so if that doesn't work, you can simply hard refresh your browser, and that usually should work, and your elastic IP should be visible. Okay, so let's try. Yes, so you can see after a hard refresh you can see your elastic IP. Now look at these two IP addresses, they both are same. Okay, so it is possible that you get the same IP address that you got before as your elastic IP address as well. Okay, it is possible, and sometimes it is possible that you get both of them as a different IP address. So anyway, a good idea is to always use this IP address rather than this public IP address. Okay, so we will copy this. We will need this IP address to connect to the instance. Now our machine is running, our virtual server or our instance is running. Okay, but our system, our instance doesn't do anything. Okay, our instance is just an empty machine running on the cloud. Now it is our duty to configure our server in such a way that it does something, right? But to configure the server, we need to connect to the system first, right? Now how to connect to this instance, right? Now to connect to this instance, you can see there is a button on the top. So select the instance, click on connect, and it will show you lot of different ways of connecting. Okay, now the easiest way to connect if you have access to the console is the first step, EC2 instance connect. Okay, so you can just click this and then click on connect. That's it. And it will open a new tab, and it will connect to the instance. That's it. It's that simple. Okay. But I would not prefer this method. The reason is, it is possible, so you can see now I am inside the cloud instance. Okay. But I would not prefer this method. Reason is, you may not have access to the console every time. Okay. So it's better that if you have the key with you, so since you know I have already downloaded the key, and if you have the key with you, you can simply use putty to connect to the instance. So you don't even have to log in to the AWS console. You can directly configure the server from anywhere just using putty, right? So let's close this. We will not be using that method. The other method that we are going to use is, if you go back to connect, you can see there is an SSH client method. Okay, so you need an SSH client, and using that you can connect to the instance. Okay, so I'm going to use putty. Let me show you how to use that. Okay, so let's copy so the only thing that you will need is the elastic IP. So let's copy that elastic IP and then open putty. Okay, so this is putty interface, right? Now it's a very simple interface. Basically all you need to do is paste the IP over here. Okay, so this is the IP that I've copied from the instance elastic IP. So put the IP over here, and now if you try to click on open, it will fail. Okay, the reason is you need to also provide the key, right? So where do you provide the key? So there is no option of providing the key. So the key is actually provided in it's a little hidden here. So you have to go to connection. Inside that, go to SSH, open that, and then go to auth, open that, and then inside credentials. So this is where you have to provide the private key. Okay, you can see it is inside connection, SSH, auth, credentials. Okay, here you can see a option of providing the private key. Click browse, go to downloads and select the key. Okay, so this key we downloaded in step 1, so that key we are selecting over here, and click on open. So when you do this for the first time, a security alert will be open here, right? So click on accept. This is nothing but adding a firewall exception, right? So once this is done, you can see I get this login as. So let me just increase the fonts appearance, right? So let's change it to, let's say, 20. Okay, so now it's a bit more visible. So now so now it is asking for a username. Okay, it has not yet logged in, but the first step is to give a username. The username, the default username for Ubuntu is Ubuntu. So let's select that. And now it is using our key to log in. So you can see here that my portfolio key that was used to sign in to the OS, and it successfully signed in, and we are inside the system now. Okay, once you are inside the system, now from here, based on what you want to host, the steps will change. Okay, now for example, let me show you. For in our case, in today's demo, I'm going to host this website. So I will be providing this URL, GitHub repo link in the description. So this is just a sample site which I'm going to host on EC2. Now you may host anything. It may be a PHP app, it may be a Python app, it may be anything, Node.js app, Express app, anything. You can host anything, but first you will have to set up the platform. Okay, now what do you mean by platform? So for example, Now this instance of Ubuntu does not have any software installed. It's just a OS, right? Now if you want to have a Node.js app running, first you have to install Node.js. If you want to have PHP app running, you have to install PHP inside this. Okay, similarly for Python, right? So any type of app that you want to run, you have to first set up the software required to run that. Okay, now in our case we are going to run Node.js, so let's first install Node.js. Okay, now how to install Node.js? Now this is nothing related to AWS, it is just common Linux commands. Okay, so first we will write sudo apt update. Okay, just to update the repositories. Once this step is done, the next step is to install Node.js and npm. Okay, so let's do sudo apt install node.js and npm. Okay, it will ask for yes or no, so I will say yes. And once this is installed, our our instance will have Node.js and npm installed. Okay, so let's wait for this to finish. Okay, so Node.js and npm are installed, so let's just verify. So node version, you can see the version installed is 18, node 18, and let's also check npm version. So npm version is 9.2. Perfect. So now our node and npm is installed. So now we are ready to run our app, right? Now to run our app, first we need to get the code, right? So go to our repo, copy the URL, GitHub URL. Then let's go to our instance putty, right? And then let's clone it. Okay, so the best way to get the code inside our instance, if you already have the code on GitHub, is just to clone it. Okay, now to the command to clone the repo is git clone, then the URL that you have copied, and that's it. Okay, so git clone the URL that you have copied and press enter. So now it has cloned successfully. Let's do an ls. ls is to list the files that are there in the current directory. So you can see there is a folder that is created, my portfolio express. Let's go inside that. Okay, let's do an ls again. So you can see there are few files. So like app.js, this is our entry point file. And this is a very important file if you know about Node.js, that package.json holds all the dependencies, right? Now in this case, inside package.json, if you check, there is only one dependency, that is express, right? So now we want to install express. Now to install express, if you have package.json already present, then all you have to do is npm install. Okay, so this will download all the dependencies that will be required. Now if I do ls again, you will see a new folder has come up, that is node modules. So all our libraries that are required like express and everything will be there inside this folder. Also you will see there is one more file called package.json. Okay, so anyway, once this is done, now we are ready to run our app. Now to run this app, the only thing you need is app.js. Okay, you have to run app.js with the help of node. Now to run that, you can simply use node app.js. Okay, so if I run this, you can see it says the server started on localhost 3000. Okay, so this is the IP. This is the just a message that I have written inside the code. Okay, so now to test it out, you need the IP address of the machine. So that is this elastic IP. Let's go to our browser, put the IP and colon 3000, right? Now, if you press enter, if everything is working, let's click continue. You can see our website is working, right? It's that simple, right? So we have a working machine, that is with a working instance with our portfolio website. Okay. Now, if we go back to our site, now if I close this terminal, everything will be dead. Okay, our website will be dead. Okay, the reason is when you close this terminal, this will be closed, and then if this server is not running, then this will not work. Okay, so what you want to do, let's press Ctrl C, that will stop the server. Press up arrow. Okay, so we will again run this server, but now this time I will use an ampersand sign at the end. Okay, what this ampersand sign says is to run this command in the background. Okay, so let's run this, and you can see it has shown us some message. Okay, and now we have the command line back with us, right? So this allows our app to run in the background, so that even if we close this putty, our server will still run our app. Okay, so that's it. Let's refresh, and you can see our website is still working, right? And that's it. This is how you host a simple website. Now if you have a PHP site, then the only change is when you set up your instance for a particular platform, you just have, instead of installing Node.js, you will install PHP. Okay, if it's a Python app, then instead of installing Node.js, you will install Python. That's the only difference. Okay, so once everything is done, we can click on we can say exit, so that will log out our putty. And now if I refresh this, you can see still our website is running, because when we ran app.js, we use the ampersand sign, right? So even after closing the putty, we are still able to see our website. Okay, now the important thing, right? So now we have done with this example, we have successfully deployed our app, but now the time is to also learn how to undo whatever we have done. Okay, so start deleting the interfaces, or deleting the facilities that we have created for this particular project. Okay, now if you randomly delete certain things, then it will not work. So I will show you step by step how to undo the things. Okay, it's very simple. The the, the process that you followed for creating the instance, the reverse you have to follow to delete the instance. Okay, now before that, before we start deleting the instance, I would like to show you one more thing. Let's go to the search and just search for tags. Okay, and here you can see there is a feature called resource groups and tags editor. Okay, now I will just show you what is the benefit of adding the tags in every resource that you create. Okay, so what you can do is, once you have the tags ready for every resource, you have added tags, right? You can group those resources with the help of this interface. Okay, so click on create a resource group and click on tagged resources, and here you have to select the tag that you have selected in all the other resources. Okay, so if you recall, I have selected name and portfolio, right? Just let's click on preview, and from here you can see whatever we have done, uh, whatever tags we have used and where we have used. Okay, so you can see we have used an elastic IP, right? So there we have created a key pair and we have created a security group. So these are the places where we have defined this security group, right? So this is how you can use this feature to find out where are the resources that we have created for a particular project. Okay, now let's go back. Now once you create this group, then you can go ahead and delete it. Okay, so this was just an optional step for you to understand what is the importance of giving tags to your resources. Okay, this just gives you a convenient way to find out what are the resources that you have used. Okay, that's it. So this step is not required as such. You just, it's an optional step. It will help you in the long run when you are actually working on AWS. Okay, so let's go to back to EC2 and let's start undoing the things that we have done for this particular project. Okay, so the first step we will go in the reverse order, right? So first step we will go to elastic IPs. Okay, and select the elastic IP and go to disassociate. Okay, so let's disassociate, that is remove that IP from that instance. Once we disassociate, then we have to go and release the elastic IP. Okay, if you only do disassociate, then IP will be still on your account and you will be charged. Okay, so you have to do both the things. Click on release and release. That's it. Now we don't have any elastic IP. Now we can go to instances. Okay, select the instance and we are going to delete this instance now. Now to delete this instance, you go to instance state and terminate. Okay, terminate, and now it has started the deletion process. Now it takes a little time to do that. So till that time we will do the remaining things. Okay, so once the instance is deleted, you can go down and then go to security groups and you can delete the security group. Okay, so let's find out the security group. So this one, go to action and delete security group. Okay, so you can delete the security group. Now right now it is saying that the following security groups cannot be deleted because it is being used by some instance. Okay, so because that instance is not yet deleted, so right now you cannot delete it. Okay, so once that instance is gone, then you can delete this security group. Then once the security group is deleted, you can go to key pairs and you can delete the key pair also. Okay, that's it. So this is how you can use EC2 to deploy your website. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you everyone.